Hello friends, in our series on Chai Pe Charcha, we are starting off with second session. Today we are going to discuss key economic indicators. These key economic indicators will continue. There are a lot of indicators with which every commerce student or every citizen is fascinated about. But I initially thought of giving a superficial knowledge of only these indicators, just tell the meaning of this indicator, how much is the value at present. But then I thought that I will cover too many indicators in a session of 30 minutes, but really I will not be able to create a research-oriented attitude among the persons who are watching it. So I thought to change a strategy, and I said that let me pass on some more knowledge of each indicator rather than just a superficial knowledge. So we are going to deep dive into the certain important indicators rather than just the meaning. So only two indicators we are going to discuss today. Only two. I can speak for around at least 3 to 4 hours on these indicators. But 30 minutes is what I have chosen. Let's see whether I can stop in 30 minutes. It's very tough to control, but let's start. Two indicators, unemployment rate and gross domestic product. So a PowerPoint presentation will be on your screen. So these are very important indicators. Let's try to understand an unemployment rate first, and then I go towards gross domestic product. Acho, there are two wonderful articles which I had read. Acho, this is not a matter, this is a lecture of 30 minutes, but to speak for these 30 minutes, I have spent 4 or 5 years, not today. The presentation it took half an hour for me to make because links were there with me. But it is what I want you people to understand is a research-oriented attitude to be developed. So there are some wonderful quotes that I pulled up from JSTOR. It's one of the largest gallery of magazines across the entire world. Lot of literally articles are on JSTOR. So this is one of the articles that was presented way back in 2009. From there, I have taken a quote. According to the Kannan and Ravindran, there is a lot of unanimity among various scholars that organized manufacturing sector in India registered a jobless growth. So India has got a growth post 1991, but many people call it a jobless growth. During the year 1980 to 81 to 1990 to 91, while the average annual growth rate of a gross value added, that is a national income, during this time was about 8.66%. The corresponding average annual employment growth was merely 0.53%. It is a data of that particular period. This is an old article, but what it tells you is when you have a growth, that growth should be meaningful growth. This growth should be secular growth. Secular is not on the basis of caste across the country. So the growth should be across the country. It should not be the growth only to the, let's say, few sections of population. So many economists think that India has got a growth, but it is a jobless economic growth. In the recent past, the data had changed a bit, but even today, we have a skewed relationship between the rate at which Indian economy grows and the rate at which employment has grown. What does it mean? It means that rich is getting rich and poor is not coming up to that extent. So India has a jobless economic growth, at least in the past. Situation has changed in a recent bit. So this was a JSTOR journal reference. I have given article number. I'll be sharing this file with you also. And there is another Washington DC based research center called the Pew Research Center. It's a wonderful one. I like their lot of articles. They said that a significant majority of Indians consider the lack of employment opportunity as a very big problem in their country. It's from their perspective I'm talking about. In their countries, for us it is our country. About 18.6 million Indians were jobless and another 393 millions are working in poor quality jobs. But the job hai, lekin that job is vulnerable to the displacement. And that's where my entire discussion is headed towards today. At the end of the discussion on unemployment rate, I'll talk about what coronavirus has created. A report of today morning, I'm going to talk 5th May. And from that's where I thought of sharing this unemployment rate insights that I had. And I made the slides somewhere in the afternoon. So that is a reference report from 2019 Pew Research Center, 25th March 2019 ka report. So it basically tells you that unemployment is very, very important for any commerce student or any economist to be read. So now let me give you some technical background to understand unemployment rate, more than the formula, and then we deep dive into it. So this, to get the numbers of unemployment rate, you need to classify your workforce or labor force or your population into different heads. Unfortunately, in India, we do not get the data so easily about unemployment or employment. Even if you get the data of employment, unemployment data is easy. Unfortunately, in India, data is not available to that extent easily. But whatever reports I have read over the period of time, I'll be sharing those reports also with you. I have a PDF of every report. So whatever I'm saying in this particular lecture, my friends, it is out of research. It is not just copy paste from some web page. It is out of a research. Reports I copied, I given the link. So National Sample Survey Organization, earlier it was called as, now it is merged with the NSO, National Statistics Office, under the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation in our country, mostly. They divide all the labor force or all entire population into 3 categories: working, that is engaged in some economic activity; employed; then seeking or available for work. You are available for work, but you are not getting a job, so आप unemployed हो. And neither seeking nor available for the work, that is kids, people like you. You are neither seeking employment nor you are looking for work. I'm assuming you are doing intermediate. So that is a total population ka breakup apna. Usme se jo first part, 2 parts hai, they are only the labor force, that is employed plus unemployed are your labor force. So employment rate is very simple. Employed workers ko chhod dena hai. Unemployed workers humko nikalna hai. Unemployed workers divided by total labor force, that is unemployed workers divided by employed plus unemployed. It is not a percentage of total population, remember that. So unemployment rate is a percentage of the persons who are unemployed out of the total workers who are available for work, not out of the total population. Because taking total population is conceptually wrong. Why are you including kids, or why are you including the retired persons in a denominator? So denominator should be only those persons who are available for work. Out of them, some are working, some are not getting the work. So it is unemployment rate. But another very important number that you should understand, which is linked to the unemployment rate, is a labor force participation rate. Labor force participation rate. That is employed plus unemployed workers divided by total population. So numerator remains as a labor force. But out of the total population, how much is a labor force participation? My friend, this rate in India hovers around 36% labor force participation. In United States, this rate is 62%. 62%. India, in number terms, absolute number terms, we have much more labor. But the biggest problem is, out of the total population in India, only 36% is participating in the labor force. And reason is an Indian mindset, bloody Indian mindset. आप बोलेंगे सर क्या mindset, मतलब Indian mindset पे कहाँ पे चले गए सर तुम? Out of the total population in India, there are a lot of, almost, let's say 47-48% is a female population, of which the participation in labor force is much lesser. We must ensure that women or the girls in our country come to the workforce. In some cases, it may not be possible if due to the family responsibilities, but to the best possible extent, at certain age at least, we should allow the women to come and participate in the workforce. That participation is much lesser. I given the statistics on the next page. So labor force participation rate in India is 36%. To a large extent, it is because females are not participating in the labor force. They are neither seeking nor available for the work. A large part of that. So they are not included. It's Indian society. We can do nothing about it. Over a period of time, I'm optimistic that participation from females will also increase. So those two key rates are there. And the third ratio is a general worker population ratio. It is total employed as a percentage of total population. Employed as a percentage of population. So all these rates were worked out by National Sample Survey Organization in India since 1950. But now they are merged under NSO. But in India, the data is not easily available. In India, the data is published much late. So look at the key numbers from Indian perspective. So you'll get a broader picture. As a student of the commerce, you should understand the broader picture first. So what is the labor force participation rate in India for the January to March 2019 quarter? This is a recent report which was published Jan to March 2019 quarter. This is only for urban areas that report has mentioned. In India, we don't have the data easily available, I told you. So males, it is 56%. 56% is the labor force participation. Now, what does that labor force participation mean? Look at the previous slide. It is employed plus unemployed. That is workers who are available for work divided by total population. So out of the total male population, 56% is available for work. I'm not saying 56% is employed. 56% is coming out and willing to work. You will say, sir, what about remaining 44%? Some will be kids, some will be retired persons, right? But look at the females, that is 15%, which is much lower. It needs to go up. And then only this labor participation force will increase. So all genders put together, it is approximately 36% for just a period 1 year ago. In urban areas, this is. But even if I take urban plus rural areas, for which I have the average for the last 17-18, you will see percentages are more or less similar. So 36% of Indian population is only coming to labor force. So imagine this percentage. I see a positivity in it. In United States, it is 62%. In India, it is 36%. That means we still have a lot of gap. So इसका मतलब क्या है? Over the years, India's labor force participation has a potential to increase. US में वो potential कम है अभी बहुत. अब बोलेंगे कैसे सर? अरे 62% of your population is coming to the labor force or labor market. 62% in US. So 62%, 38 में तुम्हारे बच्चे भी रह गए, बूढ़े लोग भी रह गए और जो लोगों को जिनको काम नहीं करना है वो भी है. तो यूएस में वो ग्रोथ नहीं है, लेकिन हमारे पास 36% आ गया, मतलब 64% ऑफ इंडियाज पॉपुलेशन इज नॉट गोइंग टू कम टू लेबर फोर्स. चलो 30-35% तो कभी लेबर फोर्स में आएगा नहीं, वो बच्चे रहेंगे, बूढ़े लोग रहेंगे. सो 100 में से 35 चला गया, रहेगा 65. चलो 40 छोड़ दो, 60% पॉपुलेशन तो काम के लिए आ सकता है, उसमें से 36 ही आ रहा है इंडिया के पास. मतलब we are India's labor market can scale up. The point I want to make out here is, if India wants to become a global leader in terms of manufacturing, let's say we want to take an opportunity from China. Let's assume, for example, that entities from China shift to India. We have a scope to provide excess labor. क्योंकि अपने पास population है, चलो वो काम के लिए नहीं आ रहा है, but potential तो है ना. 36% of population is coming to the labor market. 64% is not. So we have a potential, number one. First point, that is on labor force participation rate. Unemployment rate for the same quarter, Jan to March 2019. Today's situation is on next slide, is 9.3%. This is official data from Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, their National Statistics Office, NSO. I have all the files with me. 9.3% is unemployment rate. Matlab, out of those persons who are coming to the workforce, employed plus unemployed category is in denominator. Numerator is unemployed. Unemployed divided by employed plus unemployed is 9.3%. Worker population ratio is 34.7% all over India for 17-18. That is basically nothing but total employed divided by total population. That is for 17-18, including urban and rural areas. It is employed divided by population. Labor force participation rate was employed plus unemployed divided by population. So you understand. So unemployment rate for 17-18 all over India, urban, rural area put together, that is historical perspective I'm trying to tell you. So you'll understand how the slowdown, even prior to Corona, India has slowed down. You'll understand from these statistics. As per the usual status, what is this usual status and weekly status? I covered on the next slide. Just right now, remember. As per usual status, it is 6.1% of the total labor force. That is 6.1% of employed plus unemployed, which is 2.2% of our population. So 6.1% is unemployed. In 17-18, as per weekly status, it is 8.9%. Normally, usual status is preferred. 6.1% there was unemployment rate of India in 17-18. Now see, even prior to Corona, if you can see this, 6.1 has become 9.3. So even before coronavirus or COVID-19 came, Indian economy was slowing down. That is the data of 1 year ago. Economic activity was slowing down. It was not that we are as a result of coronavirus only. So how does this data come up? National Statistical Organization uses multiple approaches. Multiple methods are used. There's a huge handbook onto it. If anyone is interested, I can always share it. Usual status approach is basically whenever you conduct a survey for unemployment, please remember these rates are not by going door to door or home to home or office to office. That happens in United States. That happens to a large extent in the United States. This is sample. This is statistical sampling. You do a sampling of, let's say, for example, 2 lakh, 3 lakh persons across the country, and based on that, you populate it to the population. Whatever the sample size NSO selects, we have to rely on what government gives. So usual status means whenever a survey is done, 1 year ago, 1 year prior to the date of survey, what was the status of employment of that particular person who is being interviewed? And current weekly status was the status 7 days prior to the date of survey. And the daily status is each day in the last 7 days prior to the survey. आप बोलेंगे सर ये क्यों है? To categorize a daily wage worker, to ask a daily wage worker whether you were employed in last 7 days, he will say, oh, I was employed on Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, but I was not employed on Tuesday and Friday. So the other status matters. But in India, I told you, the data is, the sample size or the data collection is very, very tough job. That's what I have written on the next page, next point. NSSO or NSO now, earlier it was NSSO, now it is called as NSO. There are two offices, CSO and NSSO. They are merged into NSO. This Modi government has a habit of merging multiple entities. So they did the merging last year. NSSO surveys are conducted on quinquennial basis. That is once in a 5 year. Quinquennial means once in a 5 years. So other than those 5 year sample studies that are done in India, except in the year 2017, India has never routinely collected monthly data or quarterly data nationwide. So really what we don't have the data as such on a monthly basis, quarterly basis. Whatever NSSO data we have is a data of a 5 year period. So in between, we don't have any specific data as such. So it's a problem of data in India. But for your information, around 1 year ago, government has become serious on this unemployment, because this unemployment rate is a very important tool for a decision maker. As a government, if you have to take a decision, unemployment rate matters a lot. So government has now formed a labor bureau also. But if you visit the website of Indian Labor Bureau and you visit the website of United States Labor Bureau, आपको फर्क समझ में आएगा how serious our government is, with a due respect to government of India's efforts. We need the proper data on unemployment in India, which really on a real-time basis or quickly basis is not available. Today is Tuesday, I think, right? This Friday, United States is going to release the numbers for unemployment for the month of April 2020 in US. I'll share that report also. I have a report of March 2020, but March was not the period of lockdown in the US to a large extent. So I'll share the US rates also, unemployment rate. In US, in March 2020, official unemployment rate of the ads published by the US government was 4.4%. 4.4%. If you want, let me share my entire screen so you can see every file. So you'll be able to see now every file. I've shared my screen. So this is a report in the United States. You'll be able to get Excel sheet now on your screen. Are you able to see Excel sheet? Just raise a hand. This is a series in the US. So this is a 10-year data in the United States. Just a second, वो freeze हो चुका है वहां पर. हाँ. So the data is freezed. Let me hide these rows. So if you see month by month, 2020 unemployment rate in the US is 4.4%. Right? This is from 2010 I had taken. So 2010, if you see the unemployment rate in the US was quite high because it was just after the global financial crisis. And from there, really Donald Trump has made a good efforts and unemployment rate had come down. This unemployment rate for the month of April 2020 is not released. I'm expecting that unemployment to be anywhere between 16 to 20% in the US. 16 to 20%. The unemployment rate that the US, highest unemployment rate that US saw was at the time of Great Depression in 1929. And that was too close to the 25-26%. COVID-19 in the month of April 2020 is expected to have unemployment rate of approximately 20% in the US. 16 to 20% is my expectation. For this will be released on Friday. What is the situation of India? It is there on the next page. Have patience. So in India, Labour Bureau has started taking efforts and collecting the data. They are doing quick employment surveys also. But so far, there is a lot of efforts to be taken by Indian government to provide this unemployment data honestly and with due efforts. So there is a company which is formed, Center for Monitoring Indian Economy. It's a private limited company. It is earlier they were selling a lot of products. In case your parents are working in MNC, they might be using Provis. Provis is a product owned by CMIE. So this CMIE, Center for Monitoring Indian Economy, it is a company. It's a private company. It's a private sector company. They also collect the data from multiple points and they also release the data. So they have started this unemployment rate. It's a paid service. So they released the data today. And this was a free part of the paid service that I have shown. The paid blog is available with my friends. So whenever I have to refer to anything, I have not got a subscription. Subscription is around 2 lakh rupees per annum per user. It's a subscription, 2,18,000 to be precise, plus GST. So in India, this Center for Monitoring Economy today, 5th May 2020, has claimed that unemployment in India for the week ended 3rd of May, that is 2 days ago, had shot up to an unprecedented levels. India के लिए तो हमारे पास बाकी पास का उतना data available ही नहीं है. 27.1% of India's workforce is unemployed. Now, if you can do some good calculations, out of our population is approximately 134 crores. 134 crores ka 36% is our labor force. Of that 36% is a labor force. 27% has got unemployed. It's a 27% is the total unemployment rate. चलो उसमें से 10% तो unemployment rate corona virus के पहले से ही था. So coronavirus has killed many jobs, and which jobs are killed? Left hand side में graph देखो क्या लिखा है. Who lost the employment in April 2020? The biggest loss that is suffered is by small traders and laborers, migrant workers, poor, bottom of the pyramid. Entrepreneurs, persons who are doing a business like chartered accountants, company secretaries, everyone. 18.2%. 18.2 million numbers में ये 18.2 million. It's their expectation. This is not exact data. Government will never agree with this. Salaried person, 17.8%, 8 million numbers, they have lost the job. Farmers, there is a gain because this is a farming season. That farmer, there is a gain because persons who are migrant workers have shifted from urban areas to the rural areas and they have started doing farming. They started doing farming. So, बच्चों, क्या indicate कर रहा है? The coronavirus or this pandemic has hit like anything. The unemployment rate in the month of April 2020 was 23.5%. This is the data. 27.1 is for the week ended 3rd of May. Initially, the lockdown only hurts most vulnerable, that is informally employed people in the unorganized sector. Gradually, it starts hitting more secure job. So we are yet to see May, June, July, what will happen for the secure jobs hereinafter. God knows. Average employment during 19-20 was 404 million. That is 40 crores were employed. So if I do a quick back of the envelope calculations, बच्चों, तुमको समझ में आएगा. मेरे पास calculator नहीं तो मेरे पास calculator होगा. Take on your calculator. Our population is 134 crores. 134 crores is our population into 36%. That is giving 48 crores. 48 crores is a total labor force of our country. 48 crores में से 10% is unemployment rate. Minus 10% करो तो. Minus 10% करो. So that will be equal to 43.41 crores. 43.41 crores. 10% was the unemployment rate of 18-19. Answer comes out to 43 crores. Unemployment rate in 1920 is even more. वहां पे 404 million लिखा मैंने. That is 40 crores. 40 crores was the employment in India. Out of our 134 crore population, only 40 crore are employed. I hope you understood these statistics. There are a lot of interpretations that you can draw from this. It's a too good thing to understand and analyze. So that was on unemployment rate. We have a very, very bad situation right now, but that is negative side. It is a short-term unemployment. Obviously, this unemployment rate will reduce as government starts announcing fiscal policy. There are rumors that government of India is preparing a big package on the fiscal front. I will really be happy only when it will be announced. Definitely government will announce. There is no doubt that government will not announce. Government will announce, but government should understand that there is a lot of displacement that is done by this pandemic, and government needs to come out in a big, big quantum. We need a fiscal package which is around, let's say, 5-6% of GDP at least. 5 to 6% of GDP. We need to forget all our fiscal deficit. Everything we need to forget. Fiscal responsibility, budgetary management, bhaad mein gaya. We need to come out and help the people who are at the bottom of pyramid, because otherwise the deaths caused by economic impact will be way more than the coronavirus impact. So India needs to come out big way and address this unemployment rate issue. I hope this Nirmala Sitharaman lady and Mr. Modi, I have more hopes from Mr. Modi than Nirmala Sitharaman. This fellow is working day and night. I have good respect for Mr. Modi, not for Miss Nirmala Sitharaman. So that's my personal choice. National income. Now that's second issue to be discussed. Good statistics. So I spoke a little more here. I can't really control. Unemployment rate. There are a lot of things to be spoken about unemployment rate. If I go ahead on unemployment rate, for your information, I just shifted from my knowledge bank to this particular folder, Chai Pe Charcha Ka folder. So national, this is entire report, periodic labor force survey, which is a wonderful report on this. So you should do a research. You should get that report, periodic labor force survey. Plus there is a annual report for the year 17-18 periodic labor force survey. This is annual report that is available. So for the period July 17 to June 18. So there is a lot of data that you need to analyze before you start forming an opinion. So my only request to you as a chartered accountancy student or any professional that you are belonging to, please do a right research from bare source. Try to read bare source. I mean, unemployment rate padna hai na, rather than reading a news articles of someone else's publication, go to the bare source and try to read what the data says in the bare source, and then you go to the other source. Always trust bare sources. National income. So it's an income. It is a measurement of economic activity in the country. In a very simple language, national income is nothing but a measurement of economic activity in the country. So how do you measure this national income? Broadly, there are three ways to measure the national income. We can add up the value added by each part in a manufacturing chain or in a service industry. That is a product side. How much each person has added the value in a production chain. So let us say automobile is a final product, car is a final product. But to produce a car, there is a huge supply chain. There is someone who has made a rubber. There is someone who has made a tire out of it. There is someone who has made an engine. There is someone who has made a steel. There is someone who has made a plastic. There is someone who has made a cushion. So every person keeps on adding a value. So you calculate the value added at each stage. There is a system of national accounts for this. So national income can be a total of value added at each stage of production. So how do you calculate a value added? Value added is nothing but value of output minus value of inputs. Value of output produced by you minus value of inputs used by you. That is a value added. That is one method. Second method of calculating national income or angle is expenditure method, which is sum total of what population has spent. So households, how much they have spent, government, how much they have spent, corporate entities, how much they have spent. So take a total of spending, that is expenditure side. And third angle of measuring national income is the income side. Calculate how much income each individual has earned or each entity has earned, and then take a sum total of that. Income side, logically speaking, all the three methods should give the same answer, but that is only in the examination questions. In real life, in no country on the planet, howsoever small that country is, Vatican City may be possible, I don't know Vatican City, but there are some countries even smaller than Vatican City, actually, to be very frank. So national income can be measured as on the basis of product side or expenditure side or income side. India follows expenditure method and product side method. There is a first method is called the value added method. Second one is the expenditure method. The first two are followed in India. Third one cannot be followed in India because many Indians do not report the incomes itself. So many Indians do earn an income, they don't report the income completely. So based on this, the methods for calculating national income. National income is what? Sum total of economic activity. Total economic activity during a particular period. So value added method we use, or called as a product method, or expenditure method, or income method. In India, data is available only during using value added method and expenditure method. Those two values also do not match exactly. The difference is called the discrepancy. So this is the equation. Expenditure method is what I'm explaining to you right now. This is a popular equation. Normally, everyone focuses on expenditure method rather than the value added method. Expenditure is too good. So GDP, gross domestic product. Now, what do you mean by word gross? What do you mean by domestic? I have covered on the next page. Right now, simply understand GDP is a sum total of economic activity during a particular period. So this equation is C. C stands for consumption expenditure by households. Public like you and me, mom and pop. So private final consumption expenditure incurred by households in India. Right now, it constitutes approximately 56.7% of total GDP, calculated at the base year prices of 2011-12. 2011-12 is a base year in India right now for GDP calculation. So how much expenditure households incur? Out of the total economic activity that we have in India, 56.7% is household expenditure or private final consumption expenditure. Final matlab on the end product, not on the inputs. End product pe kitna kharch hota hai household se. Similarly, government also incurs expenses on various consumption items when government does a procurement. So government procures, let's say, defense equipments, government procures garments, government procures of food products, government pays a salary to the government workers, which is an expenditure for government, which is 11.1% of India's GDP at a base year prices level. Output produced in 19-20, this is output produced in 19-20, but the prices of 11-12. Quantity produced in 19-20, but at a price of 11-12. आप बोलेंगे सर ये कैसे कर सकते हो? इसके लिए कंसेप्ट है जीडीपी डिफ्लेटर. जीडीपी डिफ्लेटर अगले पेज पे मैंने एक्सप्लेन किया उसको. हैव पेशेंस, थोड़ा सा टाइम लगेगा यार एक्सप्लेन करने को, लेकिन क्या मैंने बोला ना आपको, आई हैव अ चॉइस बिटवीन सुपरफिशियल नॉलेज और गुड नॉलेज. I can give you superficial knowledge by keeping only 2-3 points, or a detailed knowledge. I chose the detailed knowledge. Superficial nahi hota hai mere se. Government final consumption expenditure is 11.1%. So consumption expenditure by households. Okay, see, it is not only households. Companies are also included. Private sector, basically. It's a private sector. Private sector, households plus companies in the private sector, as well as government-owned companies. Government-owned companies are also coming under a category of C. But the government of India or a state government or local authorities, what money they incur, that comes under G. So basically C is consumption expenditure by entities other than government. I did not say other than government company. Other than government. And government expenditure is G. So C is expenses incurred by people like you and me, private sector companies, public sector companies, corporations, but not the government. So government expenditure, government spends on public healthcare, government spends on police services or judiciary services, Indian borders are protected. That is G, defense. Then there is a consumption expenditure. Whatever capital expenditure we incur is called as a I, gross fixed capital formation. That capital expenditure that we incur is 30.2%. That matters a lot because this capital expenditure will generate employment in the future. When you incur a capital expenditure, it has a potential of generating employment. So if you want to eradicate poverty from a nation, you must increase spending on gross fixed capital formation. But capital formation, capital expenditure करने के लिए लोगों के पास मतलब businesses के पास पैसा भी आना चाहिए. उसके लिए savings rate important होता है. लोगों ने पैसा सेव भी करना चाहिए. Public should also save. Savings भी आएगा. Have patience. X is exports, M is imports. So exports are added because that is produced in India. Imports are deducted because import is not produced in India. Goods that we import are produced in China or United States or Europe or Africa, right? So imports are deducted, exports are added. So roughly India is a net importing nation. You know, about 2% of GDP is what we import on a net basis. 19.5% is exports, 21.5% is a GDP. Import, and total will not match to 100% because certain other items like change in opening stock and closing stock and valuables like gold or house constructions are excluded. That's a very minor amount. Valuables में gold, precious metals वगैरह चीजें आती है. So from economic perspective, this equation is GDP is nothing but private consumption expenditure plus government expenditure, consumption expenditure plus capital expenditure, capital formation, minus exports, minus imports plus exports, or plus net amount of difference between export and income, imports. So basically, when you learn a national income or when you try to understand a national income, you have to focus on 4 core areas. You have a choice of measuring national income at a constant price or at a current price. Current price matlab that particular period. Let's say you are measuring a national income for 19-20. So you take at the prices of 19-20. Constant price matlab you take the price of 19-20 and you deflate it back to some base year. Right now, India is using a base year as 11-12. 2011-12 is a base year that India has adopted. This change is done using a concept called the GDP deflator. So base year ka value, GDP deflator value is taken as 100. GDP deflator is equal to 100 for the base year. मैंने लिखा है GDP, just line लिखा है. GDP deflator of 11-12 is 100. Now thereafter, let's say you have 5% inflation in the 12-13. So next year ka GDP deflator will be 105. So what we will do is next year's income at that year's price divided by 105 into 100 will give you GDP at a base price. I showed you the calculations also. Excel sheet है मेरे पास. 2 मिनट रुको जरा explain करने दो. So we can calculate a GDP at a constant price or at a current price. Normally we measure at a current price and then we deflate it back at the constant price. आप बोलेंगे सर ऐसा क्यों? Logic है इसके पीछे. We want to measure the change in the GDP. So impact due to the price change should be ignored. When we say GDP growth rate, whenever you see a news headline, India is expected to grow at 5%, 9%, 10%, 1%, 2%. That percentage GDP growth, whichever you see in a newspaper or whatever media it could be, it is always percentage GDP growth calculated on a constant price basis. It is not at a current price because we want to see the change in quantity rather than change in the price. So we take the GDP of 18-19 at a constant price, 19-20 at a constant price with at a base price. At a base price. Then the next choice that you have is, should you consider the market price of the product or should you consider the factor cost? Difference is taxes. Market price is including indirect tax, but a factor cost is cost of labor, all 4 factors of production. Labor cost, input cost, you have got, profit is there, rent is there. So there's four factors of production that you would have learned in economics. So there is a labor, there is capital which has an interest, there is entrepreneurship which has a profit, there is a land which gets rent. Land, it is not to be understood as only land, it is to be understood as all inputs for carrying out production. So you can measure a GDP at a factor cost or at a market price. India or world right now had chosen something different, which is called the basic prices. It's a very technical concept. So I don't want to go into that technical concept right now. I just written that particular thing. यहाँ पर एक page लिखा है मैंने, self-explanatory page है. So right now India measures GDP neither at market price nor at a factor cost. GDP is expressed in India at basic prices. There is a slight difference. So factor cost is total cost of production plus profit. That is a factor cost. To that factor cost, you add indirect taxes. You deduct subsidy. You get market price. You get a market price. But taxes के बहुत सारे types होते हैं. There are some taxes which vary with reference to quantity produced. There are some taxes which are not with reference to quantity produced. So depending on the adjustment for taxes, we get something called the basic price. Basic price is in between factor cost and market price. Here is a factor cost. To that you add indirect taxes. You deduct subsidy. You get market price. In between there is a basic price. Details are there in the economics for finance syllabus of CA intermediate. You have a choice of measuring the GDP at gross level or a net level. Gross is including depreciation. Net is excluding depreciation. Everyone prefers including depreciation because logic is very simple. Depreciation is the amount that you should keep aside for replacement of assets whenever they are at the end of their useful life. That's why we measure GDP on a gross level. Then there is a concept of domestic versus national. Should we measure income earned by Indians or should we measure the income earned in India by anyone? Line बहुत अच्छा है. Should we measure the income earned by Indians? Maybe in India, maybe abroad? Or should we measure the income earned in India by anyone? The concept more appropriate method is how much is earned in India by anyone. That is called the domestic. When I use the word domestic, it means income earned in India, national income earned in India out of economic activity in India, because that is what is going to generate employment in India. That is what is going to contribute to taxes in India. So whatever is earned in India, maybe it could be earned by the foreigners. So maybe a foreign company comes to India and makes a FDI, foreign direct investment, and they earn some income, they do some economic activity. That will be included in domestic income, but that will not be national income. When I use the word national, it means income earned by Indians. National income is not that popular. To be very frank, difference between the domestic and national is much lower because economy is global now. Just like Firangis are coming to India and earning income in India, Indians are also going abroad and earning income. The difference is very minuscule between the domestic and national. So out of these points, the core point is measurement of GDP at constant prices versus measurement of GDP at a current prices. The more appropriate is constant price because it helps you to do comparison. Price level को ignore कर लेता हूँ, but वो enable करने के लिए concept होता है GDP deflator का. There are some other points which I mentioned out here. You can read. Please remember, national income is not the sum total of personal income. If I take all the citizens and I add up the personal income of all of them, or corporates also I add up, it is not going to be national income. Why? Under personal income, there is something called a transfer payment, which is like subsidies or which is like a pension. So a person receives a pension from government. It's the government transferring the money to the person. It is a transfer payment. It is not an economic activity. It's a government transferring money. So personal income includes transfer payment, but it does not include, but national income does not include transfer payment. So personal income and national income are not same, but the concept of personal income also matters a lot for government planning or for measuring consumption expenditure likely to take place in our country. So all these points, minute differences are there in the CA syllabus in intermediate economics for finance chapter. I'm just trying to tell you a broad picture right now from practical point of view. तो अभी मैं थोड़ा सा ये जीडीपी के एडिशनल पॉइंट्स है जो बेसिक प्राइस मैंने बोला ना, फैक्टर कॉस्ट वर्सेस बेसिक प्राइस, वो मैंने वहां पे पूरा एक्सप्लेन किया है. डिटेल में. हाँ, अभी स्टैटिस्टिक्स पे आते, ये जो कंसेप्ट हो गया. So we basically understood that a GDP or a national income is sum total of economic activity in a country during a particular period. Let us see how much is the GDP of India. I'll take you to the Excel sheet rather than the PowerPoint presentation because I'm more comfortable with the Excel. So let me just pull off this Excel sheet for you. Are you able to see Excel sheet? Just raise a hand. Thank you. So at a base price, 2011-12 is a base. This is GDP estimate for year 19-20. 20-21, I'm not venturing out at all. 20-21 is a coronavirus period. But 19-20 का जो estimate है, which is released by Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. Here is the press release, national accounts. No, not this. This is a manual, a press note. This is a press note that is released by Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation from their website. I have pulled up. This is on 20th February 2020. So around 2 months ago का data है. उसके basis पे मैंने Excel sheet बनाया. पूरा Excel मैंने पढ़ लिया. So GDP of 2019-20 of India, quantity produced in 19-20, but at the prices of 11-12 is in INR 14683,835 crores. Normally, you should not remember a number in INR. What you should remember is in dollars. 1 billion is equal to 100 crore. So $1 billion is 100 crore into 75 exchange rate I have picked up. That is 7,500. So this number divided by 7,500, I'm using exchange rate as 75, though the dollar today has closed at 75.81. Loss was मेरे को. So $1957 billion is a GDP of India at constant price. आप बोलेगा सर मोदी जी तो $3 trillion कहते हैं. अरे वो मोदी जी जो बोलते हैं, निर्मला सीतारमण जी जो बोलती है, वो करंट प्राइस पे बोलते हैं क्योंकि करंट प्राइस पे नंबर बड़ा दिखता है. दिस इज कांस्टेंट प्राइस. बट ठीक है, व्हाट दे से इज करेक्ट, दे आर नॉट लाइंग. जीडीपी और ये जीएनपी है. जीडीपी में क्या है? हाउ मच इज प्रोड्यूस्ड इन इंडिया. जीएनपी, हाउ मच इज प्रोड्यूस्ड बाय इंडियंस. By Indians may go to US and produce it. Right? Difference is very minor. So that's what I told you. $1,957 billion is what Indian economy produced in 1920, but at the prices of 11-12. So that is the real GDP growth. So for 2019-20, India's real GDP growth is 5%. That is 19-20 over 18-19. 18-19 real GDP. इसको बोलते हैं real GDP. This is known as real GDP. GDP of 1920 at that price. So 5% is the growth that we have got. India's population is 134.1 crore as per government data. So at a base price level, India's per capita income is 1,09,000. Now we should really not look at a base price. We should look at the current prices. So look at current prices. India's GDP. Now this is not a real GDP. इसको हम बोलते हैं nominal GDP. When I express a GDP at a current price, it is called a nominal GDP. Nominal GDP is 2717. Nominal GDP का growth is 7.5%. बच्चों, we should not look at a nominal GDP growth. We should look at a real GDP growth. ये दोनों का difference है because of inflation. Inflation की वजह से growth rate होता है. And this is where Miss Nirmala Sitharaman got confused while announcing the budget of 2020. If you heard her budget speech, she got confused when she said India is expected to grow at 10% or some percentage like that. Everybody was shocked. What? 10%? And then she said, oh, wait, this is nominal GDP growth. And she got confused and she read that statement twice. Normally, no one reports nominal GDP growth. What people and what public look at is real GDP growth. Unless otherwise stated, growth rate is a real GDP. So India's economy size is 2.7 trillion at current prices of 19-20. 20-21, this is expected to be, in my opinion, this into 1.01. That is just 1% growth I'm expecting for this year, 1%. Even if you have positive growth rate, I will be more than happy for 2020-21. And India really has a potential of growing at least at 1% level. But you can never know until what time this lockdown effect is going to be there. So if I take the India's population and find how much Indians earn per capita GDP, I'm not saying per capita personal income. Personal income may be more than the GDP depending on how much is the transfer payment. So per capita GDP is 1,52,000, but so India earns divided by 75 kiya maine, just $2,000 is what Indians make in 1 year on an average. This is very important because India ranks approximately 139 on the base in the countries list. India GDP, bacho, this nominal GDP, by looking at the total GDP, India is a fifth or sixth largest economy. Fifth largest है मेरे हिसाब से, to the best of my knowledge. You can check out fifth or sixth. वो number अभी vary हो सकता है because data of GDP for 19-20 is undergoing a change in a big way. India is a fifth largest economy in the world by the size of GDP. But if I look at per capita income, India's rank is almost 139th. That is basically because our population is also more. So don't just be happy when we become a fifth largest economy and don't celebrate, because at a ground level, there are a lot of Indians who are not earning enough amount of income. They're not earning enough amount of income. Government of India needs to understand this. We have a huge potential. I told you in a labor force, we have a huge labor force. 36% of our population is only participating in labor force. That means a huge नारी शक्ति जो हम बोलते हैं ना, बहुत बड़ी नारी शक्ति अपने पास है कंट्री में. Those girls who are watching right now, or those female students who are watching right now, please pay attention to your studies, irrespective of how much time it takes to complete the CA course. Doesn't matter, but fight and be a part of that labor force. May not be immediately. You may have to take a break at point of time on account of family reasons, but it's okay. At some point of time, you can start back life. 139th rank is what India has got in terms of per capita GDP. Now, if I give you this is a World Bank report which I had downloaded for you people. This is at a current price level. अगर मैं देखूं, India's per capita income for 2017 comparable data is available. $1,942. It is in dollars. ये अब बोलेंगे सर वहां पे तो तुमने 2000 निकाला था इधर. 2000 is for 19-20. This is for the year 2017. $1,942 is what Indians earn. Bachcho, we, including me, I criticize Pakistan because of my hatred towards Pakistan. But economically, if you look at it, we are not way ahead of Pakistan on per capita level. Pakistan's per capita is 1,500. Agreed, 30-40% is there. I hate Pakistan from bottom of my heart, but I want to be way ahead of this Pakistani. And we have potential. And really speaking, India can grow from this $3 trillion to $5 trillion, $6 trillion at a much faster rate. I personally believe. Now, this 21-22, forget about it. Whatever wealth or whatever national income India earned since independence till this 2020, India can earn in the next 5 to 7 years. 7 years is what India can earn. Matlab, $2,700 billion is what our nominal GDP is on the basis of in 1 year. But it took almost 70 years for us to reach to the level of 2,700 billion. By 2027, year 2027-28, we can reach to an economy size of 5,400 billion or maybe 5,000 billion. That means पिछले 70 साल में जो नेशनल इनकम हम लोगों ने कमाया है एक साल की पर एनम बेसिस पे, उतना हम अगले 7 साल के अंदर अचीव कर सकते हैं. वो लेवल, वो पोटेंशियल है. क्यों? मैंने आपको दिखाया है, लेबर फोर्स है, लैंड है, जो भी फैक्टर्स ऑफ प्रोडक्शन चाहिए वो फैक्टर्स ऑफ प्रोडक्शन इंडिया में abundantly अवेलेबल है. व्हाट इंडिया नीड्स टू डू इज regulatory framework should be eased. Contract enforcement laws should be easily done. In India, if the contracts are entered, commercial contracts are entered, honoring them becomes a big difficulty. Litigation should be reduced. We should do ease of doing business. Whatever ease of doing business we have done in India, in my opinion, to a large extent is on paper. We have done cosmetic changes. So look at this: Brazil, 9,800. China is $8,800. It's lower because of size of the population of China is much higher. Russia is $10,000 per capita. South Africa, Mexico, Pakistan, Philippines, Indonesia, Turkey. This is GDP. I selected some nations. I don't want to US because, you know, US is roughly around 50 to 53,000, 53 to 54,000 per dollars per annum. 54,000 should be approx. So we have a potential, bacho. We have a huge potential. So last slide for the day, the savings rate. Out of the how much Indians are savings over the last few years, the total savings that Indians are doing is coming down, and that is a worrisome figure. Gross savings rate in India in 2007-8 was 36% by households. This is not how gross savings rate is. Total savings as a percentage of GDP was 36%. So savings rate is simply savings divided by GDP. 36%, which has now come down to 30.1% for 18-19. 19-20 का figure अभी तक available नहीं है because savings rate is always after the year is over. 30% is the savings, of which almost 60% is the savings by households. Remaining is the savings by companies, private sector companies and public sector companies. This savings rate in India is coming down in comparison to India. If I compare India with Brazil, Mexico, we are too good. But if I compare India with China in terms of savings rate, my friend, we are lagging behind. Look at the last line. China's savings rate is around 46%. आप बोलेंगे सर डेटा कहां से लाते हो सर तुम? रिसर्च के मैं पॉइंट जो है वो आगे बोलता हूं इसके बाद 2 मिनट रुको जरा. So savings rate in India is much lower in its own comparison. Now आप बोलेंगे सर प्रॉब्लम क्या है? Look at the line that I written there. A falling savings rate could lead to Indian companies ending up borrowing more from overseas markets. Because my gross capital formation, if you read this particular GDP का data यहाँ पे मैंने दिया था, देखो, gross capital formation is 30.2% of GDP. So capital expenditure required is 30.2% of GDP. If your savings, gross savings are 30.1%, बच्चों you will be problematic. अब बोलोगे सर ठीक है ना मैचिंग है ना 30.2 है इधर 30.1 है. बच्चों अंडरस्टैंड करो ये 30.1% का जो सेविंग्स है इसमें से एवरी सेविंग्स डज नॉट गो फॉर प्रोडक्टिव पर्पसेस. लॉट ऑफ सेविंग्स गोज इनटू गोल्ड और होल्डिंग रियल एस्टेट एज एन इन्वेस्टमेंट पर्पस, नॉट फॉर बिजनेस पर्पस, और ओनिंग सम अनप्रोडक्टिव एसेट्स. हमारा इंडिया का जो सेविंग्स है वो अनप्रोडक्टिव एसेट्स में बहुत चला जाता है, लेकिन वो जो कैपिटल इट डजंट कन्वर्ट, एंटायर सेविंग्स डजंट गेट कन्वर्टेड इनटू कैपिटल. So savings rate is 30.1% and a gross capital formation is 30.2% of GDP. So for meeting the capital expenditure, Indian companies or Indian corporates will have to borrow from overseas, weakening India's external position. And it will raise nation's external debt, which is another indicator I'm going to talk about in the subsequent lectures. Household savings are also declining because Indians are spending more on durables. Some items like refrigerator or mobile phone, Indians are spending like mad, like on a mobile phone. Traveling, Indian households contribute 60% of total savings. If country wants high growth rate, it must raise the investment rate. I told you, gross capital formation leads to a generation of employment in the subsequent years. But investment needs funding, and that funding comes from savings rate. India's savings rate is higher than Brazil, higher than Mexico, higher than Philippines, but China is lower. That's why China is able to grow at a much faster rate. Bacho, that's it on all the slides. I told you to get the data, you need to go to the horse's mouth. That is bare source. So a lot of statistical data in India, I told you it is available on Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. And then there is one wonderful website, which is, I told you, Center for Monitoring Indian Economy hai. And then there's a tradingeconomics.com. It's a worldwide website. यहाँ से पूरा दुनिया भर का डेटा मिलता है तुमको. So दुनिया भर का डेटा पूरा मिलता है. एक पॉइंट मैं बोलना भूल गया तुमको. Just a second. ये जो GDP था यहाँ पर, यहाँ से हम GDP डिफ्लेटर निकाल सकते हैं. GDP डिफ्लेटर निकाल सकते हैं. देखो, एक 2 सेकंड का पॉइंट है सिर्फ. Then I will stop. India GDP for 19-20 at a base price is 1957 billions. But at a current price, it is 2,717 billion at a current price. So that means if these prices are equal to 100, if the base price is equal to 100, how much is current price equal to? That is what the GDP deflator is. GDP deflator is a number. So GDP deflator मैं निकालता हूं यहाँ पर. This GDP divided by, I have to do cross multiplication. See, basically what I'm doing is 1957 is equal to 100. So 2717 is equal to how much? So 2717 divided by this into 100. I'll get a GDP deflator. 138.82 is a GDP deflator. Exact GDP deflator can be slightly different. This is the data that I keyed in, but मेरा calculation कभी normally बहुत बड़े amount से गलत नहीं जाएगा. 138.82 is a GDP deflator. मतलब क्या है? This is a GDP deflator for year 19-20. What does it mean? You take a GDP of 19-20 divided by 138.82, multiplied it by 100, you will get a base GDP. It also means inflation rate in the last 8 years. Base year was 11-12 at the base prices. Base prices कौन से year के थे बच्चों? 11-12 to the current price, that is 19-20. What is the inflation rate? I can calculate inflation rate. Number of years कितना है? So this is like maths का formula. Present value was equal to 100. Now future value is equal to 138.82, and number of years n is 8. 11-12 to 19-20, 12 to 2020, 8 साल होते हैं यार. So what is the rate? This is the inflation rate. CAGR of inflation. So CAGR of inflation is how much? Let me calculate. So there is a future value divided by present value raised to 1 upon n, that is 1 by 8 minus 1 into 100. So rough, that is 4.18%. So average rate of inflation in India is 4.19% in the last 8 years. That is how the GDP deflator is. GDP deflator is a CAGR of inflation, compounded annual growth rate. Now actual GDP deflator can be India GDP deflator. India GDP deflator. Google ने कैलकुलेट करके दे दिया हमको. Hey baby, look at this. ऐसा चिल्ला चिल्ला के बोलने का. Hey baby, hey, कुछ तो ऐसा कर देना. India's latest GDP deflator is 138.80. I got how much? I got 138.82. So that is the GDP deflator. So bachcho, I promise half an hour, but I spoke for 1 hour. I'm sorry for that. But I hope you understood two concepts. Superficial knowledge se detailed knowledge is always better. I have shared just 5% of what I know on employment rate and GDP. बहुत सारी चीजें पड़ी हुई है over the years. As I told you, it's not just 1 year का outcome. It's multiple years. But thank you for patient listening. Many students have listened it patiently. Thank you. See you tomorrow with another session. Bye-bye. Thank you. Do give your feedback.